Hey guys, thanks for joining us for episode 14 of Cage Side Convos. I am Rick Huntsman.
And this is Quince. What's up?
So this week we're going to talk a little bit about patience. We're going to kind of talk about how we both define the word and how we approach being patient in our daily lives and how we've kind of come to the understanding of the necessity of being patient and maybe the difference between being patient and waiting.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, of course, patience is the capacity to cope with delay when it comes to trying to reach your goals. How's that?
I like that.
Yeah. And it's, I mean, you hear it time and time again. You know, patience is key. Patience is a virtue. But really, you know, what it comes down to, I think, is that it's another practice in discipline and self-control. Sure. You know, I think we're all impulsive by nature, dating way back just to how the mind is built. It's something that we have to learn. I don't think we're necessarily born with patience. I think, honestly, patience is first understood through your faith or your calling, I guess you would say. You know, because these are the things that we put in onus on to help us understand the true value and uncover the true value of patience. I think we talk a lot about discipline and self-control, and it plays such a heavy role in self-actualizing and building the sort of life that we want. There are a lot of things that we get hooked on, due to instant gratification, in today's world that we have here. But I think that patience promotes an understanding of the process itself. Once that faith-based patience helps push you through that first level, and helps you understand the importance of it. I think understanding the process itself allows for patience and gives room for patience. It's an understanding of where you are now, where you want to be, and essentially taking the time to take all of those steps to get from point A to point B.
Right, not skipping steps. I like, so one thing I really like to do is try to examine a lot of the things we talk about, so, human characteristics and stuff, and assess them from an evolutionary standpoint, which kind of, it helps understand why these things are necessary, right?
Sure.
So being impatient is a very common human quality, right? So if you look at it, you said dated way back, if you look at it at an evolutionary standpoint, being patient wasn't always a thing that we could necessarily do, right? So, caveman times, right? If you're patient, you're just like, no, I'll wait for the next animal to come by and I'll get that. Like you don't have the luxury of being patient,
right.
So you kind of have to jump on the opportunity that's right there, whether it's the best thing for you or not. You kind of have to metaphorically and literally pull the trigger when the opportunity's there.
Sure.
But I definitely think as we've evolved, and kind of you touched on a little bit, as technology has advanced, I think being patient is a little bit more of a luxury, but something we don't always necessarily indulge in because it's painstaking, and you talked about that. So like faith-based doesn't even necessarily have to have religious context, I don't think, but trusting in the process, having faith in your process,
Right.
So. And whether you have faith in a higher being or universe or whatever, however that manifests for you.
Sure. Yeah. And I was speaking in the sense of faith in calling, in a calling, or faith in something that you wanted, that you really believe you need,
kind of purpose.
that you work toward purpose. Yes. Exactly.
Right. So would that take 2.5 minutes to drop that word this time?
Purpose.
But yeah, I think. We talk so much about how defining your own purpose and finding meaning in life kind of gets you away from a lot of the modern woes and how you can help deal with anxiety, depression,
Sure.
Quit worrying about not having money and you know, physical signs of wealth and stuff like that. Once you find your purpose, like you said, your calling, putting faith in the notion that that's right for you, but then the self-discipline that comes with establishing patience in diligently working towards that goal and not skipping steps.
Right. And you know, and it is difficult because, like you said, there's, you know, in waiting or in time, there is discomfort, there is struggle, you know, and things of that nature. But I came across this this term, which I think is interesting because we've talked about, we've talked about it before, but we've never really defined it. And it's called precessionary events, which, you know, it's the ideal that what you become during the process is almost more important than the goal itself.
Sure. And what is precessionary?
Precessionary events.
Precessionary events.
Yes,
Okay.
precessionary events. And where am I at? And you know, it's basically saying that you know, in working toward this goal, and having respect for time and what time has to offer, and going through these struggles, this discomfort, overcoming these things, are really what add value to our being, our sense of being, and our, whether it's our character, or whatever, moving forward.
Right.
You know, it's not necessarily the money you get at the end.
Right.
You know, because you can be given, I mean, shoot, what if I say, hey, Rick, you're famous today, here's $1 million, what's going to happen to it?
Right.
You know, I think, I mean, I can't speak for you, but like sometimes if you don't build your $1 million, what are you going to do when you get $1 million?
Right. Right.
You know, that could be gone tomorrow.
Right.
You know, it could change your whole, your outlook or daily routine like that.
Sure.
And not always for the better. But if you take the time and understand how you get each dollar, how you save that so it becomes $2, where to invest it, you know, and things like that, you will become, through that time that it takes to learn, better suited to have $1 million in your pocket, and still be, you know, that same person that you want to be.
Yeah, absolutely. Our boy Alex Slurry dropping that reminder right now for people to get out and vote today. So go do your civic duty. Go cast a vote. Always the mindful one, I guess. Alex, I don't know if I can always say it, but good call there, brother. Thanks for chiming in, man. Thanks for watching as always.
Yeah, that's a good call.
But so back to this notion of patience, and a lot of what you kind of described there, to me, resonates as it really cultivates an understanding of the process.
Yeah.
And it really helps you appreciate each painstaking effort that you take, right?
Sure.
Now, if you're impatient, or if you're looking for that instant gratification, you know, and you rush through all the steps, or you try to skip steps and stuff like that, it removes you from the moment. You're not present. So once you get to that point, once you get to that $1 million point, you know, you forget everything that it took to get there, and you blow the money and you do irresponsible things, you know. So and you see it all the time with people that get famous kind of overnight, or athletes that make it, you know, to the NFL or MLB, you know. They make it big, all of a sudden they have all this money in their pocket, they forget what it took to get there, or you know, a lot of those guys are kind of rags to riches stories. And some of the athletes that get all this money and they turn around and they reinvest in their community and they make the best of their money are the guys that I think that were more patient and more aware and more kind of appreciative of the struggles that it took to get there.
Absolutely. You know, and I think you definitely see it in the world of music and entertainment. You know, people will, you know, instead of working on their own individual craft, you know, and crafting their own voice, you know, they're quick to hop on what's popular right now. They hop on the bandwagon, and they might get a lot of attention for doing things that other people are doing who get attention. And, you know, they'll get the attention, they'll get the money, and now they're famous, and they're not even really sure why. You know, they're not even really sure why. So now when that, what's popular changes and shifts, they're kind of stuck. You know, you're shit out of luck. You know, you might have the money or the image right there in that moment, but there's no longevity. in chasing things that are not self-involved. There's a quote by Leo Tolstoy, I think his name. He said that the two most important warriors are patience and time. And, this is a dude who wrote War and Peace.
Right.
And I don't know if you guys know how thick that is. It took him 8 years to finish the whole thing.
Sure.
Like, I can't imagine something like that.
Yeah.
8 years to finish this novel, but it stood the test of time. It definitely ranked. I didn't read the whole thing. I'm not gonna lie. It's gonna take me more than 8 years to read it.
Yeah. Speaking of patience, that book is gonna take some time to read.
But he understood that success is not, any one point. It's not finishing that book. Success is certainly, a journey.
Sure.
I would say, and it's that patience that I think allows us to be able to take a step back and be like, instead of damn, I'm not here yet. I'm not doing this. I'm not making this yet. It's to understand that, in between all of these moments, A, B, and C, there are things to be learned, things to be appreciated, and to be respected and understood moving forward.
Absolutely, man. I think one of the big concepts that I've come to understand from training jiu-jitsu is that things come to you when you're ready for them, right? So something that happens in jiu-jitsu or Muay Thai or all martial arts is you are exposed to a technique or a concept many times, right? Sometimes it's 2 weeks in between it, sometimes it's 2 months or 2 years, and every time you're re-exposed to a particular technique or movement pattern, you learn a little bit more about it. And you could have the same information delivered to you in the exact same way 4 times, and each time you hear it, you learn a little bit more, right? You pick up things that you weren't ready for the first time, that overwhelmed you for the first time, or didn't understand the first time, right? So, which it gets frustrating because everybody that comes in and trains wants to be good right then, right? And I've definitely find myself falling victim to that mindset sometimes, like, shit, I should be better at this by now.
Right.
I should be here. And then reminding myself that, things do happen in time and you can't rush that. And if you do rush it, you kind of end up in kind of like you talked about those guys that get popular that don't know why they're popular, and you end up in this trendy kind of false position of success, where, you think you're good and you're doing okay, but you're not really well developed. You didn't learn all the lessons you need to learn, and you rush the information. You didn't build yourself as the kind of person that was ready for that $1 million moment.
Right.
Something that you kind of talked about was the mindfulness, in developing patience and kind of understanding that is, and I think a lot of it is being able to connect to the moment and understand that every single thing that you do, whatever capacity it is, it's one step towards, whatever that goal is, and appreciating that step and being patient and understanding that it's all building in that progress.
Right. Yeah, well, I just think we live in a very impatient society.
Sure.
In a very, instant gratification society.
Sure.
This stems in large part due to technology and our dependence on it. Everything is, Instagram or instant access.
Yeah. Look, we're broadcasting live right now.
Yeah, well, sure. The pros and cons of it, but still, the dependence on it is, I think it does have the ability to kind of rewire our brain and our expectations. As far as what success looks like, we see it. We'll see it in music or on the news or YouTube. People getting a whole bunch of views just overnight.
Yeah.
And so that's the sort of stuff that you see and grow to expect. But you don't see, the 500 videos or that they might have put out before with no feedback, or the person shooting in the gym for years and years.
Yeah.
I think This is something that Gary Vee talks quite a bit about. I remember you let me borrow that one book of his. And, I try and keep up on some of his podcasts, but he's very heavy on the concept that there's no real thing as overnight success.
Yeah.
There's just stuff that people see, and there are things that, a lot of stuff that people don't see.
Right. Well, and we, so kind of to talk about the social media kind of instant gratification thing, I think this is something that everybody talks about and everybody's aware of. But something that kind of took me a while to understand is the why of it, and we start attaching meaning to things like likes and shares.
Right.
And for no real reason other than because of how the technology has evolved and because of the way that our culture is right now, we think that means that's a personal validation. If somebody likes my picture, then it somehow validates me. You know what I mean? Instead of just understanding it as, this is a neat way to share and to stay in touch with people, all of a sudden now, again, we're attaching our self-worth to these social media accounts and stuff.
Right.
And when you share something, I mean, man, I've done it before. I've shared something that I thought was like really cool, really profound, or a neat picture or whatever, training video or something, and I'll find myself every 3 minutes opening Facebook, opening my Instagram, and just looking to
See if anyone
who
responds.
liked this, who did this, who shared this, but why?
I think that's just a part of how our brains are being rewired to it.
Yeah.
We need that endorphin kick.
Yeah.
To go and see that people are following or that they shared, or maybe see if anybody commented.
Yeah.
Instead of, trusting in the value in which we put it out there in the first place.
Right.
Of course, easier said than done.
Yeah.
Easier said than done.
But it's something you can practice.
Sure.
And not to steal all of your talking points, but something that you touched on a little bit earlier when we were chatting was removing yourself from that for some time.
Kind of just like detoxing from.
Almost, yeah.
Yeah.
And then it kind of, when I've experimented with stuff like that, just leaving my phone alone for the weekend or something, it feels like it.
The weekend?
Yeah.
Damn.
Yeah.
More power to you.
Yeah. I gotta be busy. I gotta be gone.
Sure.
I
respect that.
If I'm so I was down in New York City a couple weeks ago, and I wasn't paying attention. My phone died while I was out and about in the town. I went to that concert there at Madison Square Garden.
Right.
And my phone died, and I was just like, well, so the next 8 hours, most of the trip, I just didn't have my phone with me or available, and I found myself even reaching in my pocket and touching it. I was like, I can't use this right now.
Oh man, it's so addicted.
Even in situations like that, you realize it is, it feels very truly addictive because you get that, you get that dopamine response. It hits your reward center in your brain, but I feel like being removed for it for a day or 2 days or 8 hours or 6 hours or whatever, longer stint than normal. I feel like it kind of rewires that reward sensation. You start understanding, you start putting more stock in tangible and actual rewards, like appreciating the scene around you, having a conversation with somebody, kind of restructures and reconnects you to the world around you.
For sure.
That being said, I ain't a big fan of doing it all the time.
I try and it's small steps for me, because it's like, I use it to promote and connect and things like that. But then sometimes it just becomes the art of promotion. And I forget about the actual art, the actual content. So I try not to touch my phone in the morning, get my routine in. And get my run in, and maybe not touch it for the first time, or hop into social media until I'm up on the top of the hill in the park or something like that, and then from there I can start my day. Certainly I would love to work past that. Just a little bit. Dropping it for a weekend, man, that would be a blessing. It really would.
And it's one of those things though too, is because it's undeniable that social media is an amazing tool, and it's an amazing way to stay connected to people. And it's if you start structuring building connections and promoting business and you know, whatever your goal is through social media, that becomes a full-time job too.
Sure.
You know, so saying, okay, well, I'm going to be patient. I'm going to not get this instant gratification. I'm going to step away from my phone for a weekend. Sometimes that means that, whether it's true or not, but sometimes it feels like your business endeavors or your promotional endeavors or whatever you're trying to accomplish, it feels like that goes away. I feel like in those 2 days that you're gone from your phone, you lose everything you've built.
Sure, that
which
momentum.
Is asinine when you look at it logically.
Right.
You know, people aren't just going to forget about you overnight, probably.
Maybe.
You know, but it's hard. You know, it's hard to be patient. It's hard to, you know, think long term.
Right.
You know, kind of just letting it work while it's out there and remembering, you know, okay, well, it's important for me to be centered, and because stepping away from social media for your phone is an act of discipline, and it's an act of self-betterment, you know, and making yourself better so you can help make others better, you know. So even if we run the risk of being forgotten overnight, if we feel like it's the right thing for us to do, and we're going to benefit from it, and long term we're going to be a better person, you know, don't skip that step. You know, sometimes you have to take that risk.
Sure.
You know.
Sure.
And still be patient and understand that's a necessary step.
Yeah, one of those, you know, one step back, 2 steps forward type of thing.
Sure, yeah. Which, that's another, so this notion of plateauing, right? And so for anybody who's ever trained in any capacity has felt this, especially like strength training, lifting, right? You see a huge increase when you first start. Your weights are going up like 10 or 15% every week, which is huge gains in the strength building world. And then all of a sudden you quit making your gains, you know, and it was like, I even hate the word gains. Sorry, that's personal thing for me. But getting past that, but you feel like your gains are stagnating, you know, and you're plateauing, and you're not. Maybe you're only adding 5% to your 1 rep max over the course of 6 weeks, instead of feeling like you're progressing every single week, you know, and you plateau. So my biggest advice to students, whether, you know, and you experience the same thing in jiu-jitsu, Muay Thai, martial arts, anything that you study, art, you know, whatever, you plateau. And my biggest advice is always, you know, just keep going through the steps, just keep showing up, just keep doing it, because eventually you'll break that plateau. Yeah. Because no matter how much it feels like you've stagnated, if you keep doing the work, if you're willing to be patient with yourself, be patient with the process, you're still moving forward. So any activity, any positive step in the right direction is still progress, no matter how it feels like you're standing still. So even if we, you know, again, taking time away from social media, or taking time away from the gym, or taking time away from whatever we're working on, it feels to us like it's a step back, right? But it's still it's still a positive step. It's still a positive thing to do, and ultimately is going to lead us to being successful. You know, so even if it feels like you're going backwards, no matter what's going on, if you are making yourself better, you're making the people around you better, or you're just showing up and doing the work, you're always progressing forward. You know. No,
absolutely. You know, there's a certain point in time, like when we first started doing shows, started knocking out a whole bunch of shows, and we play it, you know, one place after another, and it was very new. You know, we had never played here before, or maybe the first time we played at this one spot, there were only 10 people, and now there, you know, 60 people, and now there. So, but then even after a while, you know, given the area where you seem to have played every place, you know, you've seemed to knock out a lot of these big shows, and you kind of lose that drive, you know, to do shows and keep doing it. And you have to understand, is it, you know, is that the plateau? Is that it? But, you know, taking that
top, or is it the plateau?
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Exactly. And some people might be like, hey, that's the top. That's where I want to be. But I think for most, you know, or at least for myself, it is understanding that it was a plateau, and for me to take that step back. And it didn't mean that I wasn't still working, writing new music. But I wasn't necessarily visibly out there, whether putting music out, content out, or being out there physically. But taking that step back away from social media or performing out gave me that time to reshape my set, you know, plan ahead for bigger shows or different areas. and that'll help me boost to that next level. So where people might think that, hey, maybe he's quit, or maybe just drop back. Yeah. I mean, there's always forward progress, whether or not people see it. And I think, that's often what we talk about, with this instant gratification thing. There's constant forward progress, whether or not people see it.
Right. Whether people are liking or sharing,
right,
or showing up to the shows or whatever's going on.
Exactly.
And I think one of the first kind of things that popped in my mind when we started toying around with the notion of patience was the difference between being patient and waiting. Yeah. Which I think a lot of people, the inherent understanding of patience is very passive. Just be patient, it'll happen. Just be patient. Like, what are you doing in the meantime? Like you said, when you took a step back from doing shows, you're being patient with the process, but you're not just sitting there waiting for things to change. You're actively working behind the scenes, and taking whatever small steps are available, or whatever small steps are possible, or whatever small steps you can.
Right.
Controlling what you can control. You can't control time. So waiting, I think, is just sitting there. You're in the waiting room at the doctor's office.
Expecting someone else to do it for you.
Yeah.
Do something for you.
Yep. But being patient is actively working.
Yeah.
And the one meme that circulates around a lot is good things come to those who wait, and they X out the word wait, and they're like, get out there and bust their ass for it. Well, yeah, but I think the feeling of the saying good things come to those who wait is more a lesson in patience. You're not just sitting there twiddling your thumbs. You can work behind the scenes and stuff, but you can't rush it.
Right.
Because what happens if you rush your goals? I think you end up changing your goals. You end up redefining your goals, and you force fit them into this cookie cutter image of whatever's in front of you.
Yeah.
Because you got impatient, because you got sick of waiting. Or oh my God, man, especially endurance athletes, like high intensity athletes, have a really hard time taking rest days. Tell guys, take a rest day, take a rest week. Oh my God. You thought you slapped them right in the face. You tell a high intensity, a hardcore athlete to take a rest week,
right?
And they freak out,
right?
Because
they're so focused on the now and not thinking of the longevity.
Exactly,
of it.
And that's exactly it, man. They not being able to be patient and understand that resting is work,
right?
Because they feel like they're waiting.
I like that.
That, man, once I started understanding rest as work, it completely changed my outlook, man. I feel like I can train longer. I feel like I can train at a higher capacity more frequently when I focus on the rest portion of it, But resting is more being patient. It's not just waiting.
Yeah.
You're being patient with your body. You're letting your body recover. You're letting your mind recover. And you're not force fitting your goal is to get better. Whatever your goal is, to be a world class athlete, to be title winning fighter, whatever,
Right.
To be world famous artist, whatever it is, right? If you rush, and if you won't be patient, and if you won't accept that resting or plateauing or sometimes sitting still, and it feels like you're waiting, if you don't accept that all of that is part of the process, then you start forcing yourself into situations you don't belong.
Sure.
You start playing shows that know you shouldn't. You start working with artists that you don't really believe in. You start taking fights on promotions you don't believe in. You start. I know I train with a bunch of guys who do obstacle course races and stuff now, and they, a lot of those guys will run injured and stuff, but you have to understand like how injured is too injured to run.
Right.
And so you start force fitting your goals and say, well, I have to run this race. Well, this race might not even mean shit. It might basically just be a practice run, but you run it hurt because you feel like, well, I can't miss this. I can't sit around and wait.
Sure.
So.
Yeah, quality definitely drops.
Yeah.
But you talk about rest is work, and that's something I wish I would have heard years ago, because for so long, sleep was always the enemy.
Yeah.
Sleep was the enemy. And don't get me wrong, just in the idea that you need to get in your 10,000 hours. You got to get them in, no matter what, But I spent a lot of time trying to play catch up, and I would spend consecutive nights not sleeping and just working or just writing or making beats or whatever, it was that I was doing at the time, without ever understanding the value of sleep or the value of that rest.
Right.
You know, I'd there were times where I would try and I remember we were doing shows. There was a show we did out of town way back in the day, and it was a fashion show. We were playing a fashion show for a runway and things like that. And so I was trying to write new songs just like a couple days before,
Right.
and memorize them. So I was staying up late trying to memorize it, and there was a certain point in which I fell asleep way earlier than I wanted to. I think my body was just exhausted.
Sure.
And getting that sleep actually helped me absorb everything that I had been working on.
Yeah.
Instead of staying up all night long, man, really just getting the rest and letting my body, do the rest of the work.
Right.
And it seemed almost like a superhuman trick.
Right.
That's how new it was to me. The idea that sleeping was actually beneficial to what I was trying to do. I'm like, damn,
That's awesome, man.
felt like I had a cape on. But yeah,
Yeah.
that's definitely good advice, man.
Yeah.
Great
well,
advice.
So you mentioned the 10,000 hours, right? So it's basically the notion that it takes 10,000 hours to master a skill,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I think people will, you get in that mindset and you say, all right, I need to hit 10,000 hours. And you'll say, all right, I'm gonna get 5, I'm gonna get 6 hours today, of whatever skill. And then especially, man, when it comes to training, man, if you ever try to train for 5 or 6 hours in a day, it's exhausting.
Right.
And at a certain point, the quality is not there. So it's not just 10,000 hours. It's 10,000 hours of quality reps. If you're sitting there, it doesn't matter how many repetitions you do. If you're doing poor reps, right? If you're writing bad songs, if you're throwing bad punches, if you're drilling bad technique, it doesn't matter. Those are wasted hours. If you're so tired that you can't remember what you did, or you can't make that mind-body connection, if you can't make your body do what it's supposed to do when you're training, man, rest. You need to rest.
Right.
And holy shit, man, 10,000 hours.
Right.
If you work, if you work on something an hour a day, I think when I did the math, I think it works out to being almost like 30 years that it takes to master a skill. If you work on it an hour a day,
Right.
it's 30 years. That takes a lot of patience. If you rush those 10,000 hours, it's 40-hour work week, so you get 40 times 50 weeks in a year, it's 2,000 hours, so 5 years if you work 8 hours a day on something, right, to master that skill. But do you have any skill that you can put in the time and get 8 hours of quality reps every single day?
Not while keeping a good balance with everything else,
man. No, not at all.
It's funny because I was listening to something with because that was from a Malcolm Gladwell book.
Right.
He had coined that phrase, and he was like, the guy that was interviewing him, he's like, well, you say you need 10,000 hours, but what about I think it was Mozart? He was conducting when he was writing music when he was 11.
Yeah.
And he's like, yeah, but have you heard it? It was shit.
It
was shit. He's like, he didn't really put out anything of quality until he was 2021.
Right, sure.
And I don't know Mozart's music that in depth, but I just thought it was kind of funny.
Yeah,
it's kind of funny.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and because it's that 10,000 hours, and people might get caught up on the number, and think just because you have that number, that you're automatically what you expect to be, or where you expect to be, or where others might be. But it is, if it's 10,000, of those 10,000 hours, if that time put in, if 8,000 of it is not quality time,
Right.
and if you're not really appreciating and having patience for those moments,
Right.
and keep, being aware of why you're here, why you're putting in the work,
Right.
what you want from it, then it doesn't amount to the same. Then it's still just a number.
Right. I think that you touched on this earlier, but it's more about what you become in the process than hitting that goal. And I think very much to your point, if you're focused every single hour of those 10,000 hours, by the time you get to that 10,000 hour point, you quit counting a long time ago.
Right.
Because you quit caring about the mastery.
Yeah.
And I think that you forget about the mastery. You don't even care. And at that point, you put in 10,000 hours or something, you're like, I am never going to perfect this anyways. And you're just enjoying doing it.
You become it.
Yeah.
or it becomes you, or however you want to look
exactly,
at it.
Exactly. It's inseparable.
To become the process,
Right.
I think, is the ideal state of being that people try and reach, that I try and reach.
Yeah.
You know, I don't want to have to think about waking up. I don't want an alarm at 5 a.m. to wake me up so I can get started on my routine. I want to wake up before it, turn it off, and jump right into it.
Yeah.
And have everything kind of flow out from there.
Yeah. But it's a matter of being patient, man. 10,000 hours is a long time. It's a long time.
Yeah. So you better make sure you do what you love.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. And I mean, again, so an hour a day, 30 years, that's, of working on mastering a skill and being patient and just saying, but you're not going to do something for 30 years that you don't love. You're not going to put in an hour of work every single day on something you don't love. Right. And it has to be something, like you said, you want to get up before your alarm and you want to start working on it. Mm-hmm. And whatever it is, and it can be a hobby. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? It can be your job. It can be your purpose. It can be, whatever it is that you've decided that you're going to put in those 10,000 hours on. But you've got to be patient. You've got to understand that it takes time and appreciate the fact that shitty reps don't count. I don't think I've ever talked to anybody that has a job that's just a job, kind of the typical cliche 9 to 5 that they hate, and they say, man, by 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I'm checked out. Right. So even if the first 5 or 6 hours of your day were quality reps, those last 2 or 3 hours don't count. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? You're just there. You're just existing. You might as well not even be there. So.
Yeah. And there are a bunch of artists that come to mind that might be popular and that they put out. And I'm thinking, big. Sure. Well known outside of here, that just put out mixtape after mixtape after mixtape, and people, people are like, oh man, he's so good. He drops a mixtape every such and such, and I've listened to it. Well, there's one artist specifically. I think his name is Lil B, and he's got a huge following. And I would never knock that, but. I listen to the music, and the music is absolute trash. It's absolute trash, and I'm like, what does it amount to? Like, did you plan on making just the most amount of music so you could just always have something to put out there, or like, did you want to be good eventually, like, or what? Where's the quality of it? So it is a sense of quality over quantity. Right. When it comes to stuff like that.
Well, and I think you kind of touched on something there. I think it's really goal specific. Did you want to be good eventually, or do you just want to be the guy that just can churn out, just constantly, every single day release some music? Right. Well, if you want to be good eventually, your reps have to be quality reps. Yes. And if you just want to be well known, if you just want to have the biggest, archive of music ever out of anyone that's ever existed. Right. Okay, well then you can put out just 10,000 songs. Yeah. So I think it's very goal dependent. Sure. And if you really want to fall in love with the process and you really want to understand the process and really want to work towards constant self-betterment, towards constant growth and stuff, I very much think it's worthwhile to put in the time for quality reps and just being patient, and again, not necessarily waiting around. You do have to wait for the time to pass, but being patient is working and filling those hours with things that are going to continually work you towards that goal. Sure.
Sure. And there are things that you can do in everyday life that help you kind of combat, the impulsiveness or the impatience in the modern day world. I was just at work the other day talking about how I try and turn off my phone and the game or the TV at midnight. Sure. So I can go to sleep and get some solid rest without distraction. And the person I was talking to was like, oh, well, I can't even go to sleep without without something on or playing in the background. And I'm like, well, me either, often, you know, but that's why I'm doing it, you know, because I've got to retrain, you know, my mind, you know, and learn to cope, you know, with that, just with the silence and with just how the mind works. I'm like, that's the whole reason why I'm doing it. You know, when we were talking about how, you know, the phones and the TVs and everything being instant and constant and available to you, changes the mind. And, you know, I think there are a lot of people with insomnia, or a lot of people taking prescription medication for things that you shouldn't necessarily have to, you know. So, you know, I was just explaining to him, and this is, you know, this shit is blowing his mind. He's like, well, I never thought of it that way, you know. And I'm like, you know, it's just, you know, all of this is a practice in mindfulness and self-discipline and things like that. So, you know, sometimes having these regimented schedules helps me, you know, creates that that framework for me to start working and practicing on, you know, the self-discipline again, or things like meditation are huge. You know, just being aware of the moment and, you know, kind of reeling your mind back in when it goes off on different tangents, because it will. But being able to being okay with that and bringing it back to that center, and you can do that. You can really do that anywhere. You know, whether it's at home, whether you're standing in line at the grocery store or pumping gas, just giving yourself to be in that moment and aware, you know, in that silence. I think even small things like that help you with patience and self-discipline.
For sure, man. So you said that, you know, being in line or pumping gas and stuff like that, and I still do it sometimes when I'm not being mindful, like you said. One exercise I started doing though was if I'm standing there pumping gas and I'm, you know, find myself just looking at the ticker, waiting for the, you know, I know how many gallons are going to go into my car. When I find myself doing that, I'll take a deep breath, I'll look around, and I'll say, what's going on right now? What's going on around me? What's the air temperature? Is it raining? How does this feel like on my skin? What does it feel like, you know, on my mind? What am I seeing? Just really appreciate everything that's going on right there. Even if it's just a nondescript. I mean, like today, it's 40 and raining. There's nothing super beautiful outside to be seen, but you're alive in that moment, you know, and being mindful of it. You know, or you're in the grocery store, you're waiting in line, maybe things are taking a long time, taking a deep breath, looking around, looking at the people's faces that are around you, watching the cashier ring up groceries, watching their assistant, you know, the bagger bag things up and stuff, and just kind of cataloging everything that's going on. And I found that really connects me to the moment at hand, you know. And so kind of going back to what you were talking about with turning off the TV before you go to bed and stuff like that. Probably a little over a year ago, I really started focusing on making myself do that, turning off the TV and going to bed. For a long time, I'd just leave my TV on. I'd sleep on the couch all the time. I didn't sleep on my bed for years, just because it was easy and convenient. And I'd watch the TV and it would stay on, and then I'd wake up and it would have automatically shut off. You know. When I started really evaluating why that was hard for me to get away from that is, I think I had this feeling that I would miss something if I turned the TV off. And I mean, what the hell was I watching? I was watching The Office on Netflix for the 15th time. You know, I was watching shit I'd already seen. But somehow in my mind, it had cultivated this mindset that I would miss something if I turned the TV off. That if it was quiet, I wasn't actively doing something. You know? Which is crazy. What the hell are you gonna miss at 2 o'clock in the morning?
Well, and it's not only that, especially when we're watching something, you know, or doing something that's repetitive. We do that repetition so the mind can drift a little bit. So a lot of times when you're rewatching these shows, or even when I'm, you know, watching the game, really I'm thinking, you know, I'm thinking about the day, the next day or the day, you know, before. So I think that's always what I didn't want to lose. You know, I was like, oh man, I don't want to, you know, I don't want to miss something. This is my only time to myself, so this is how I wanted to spend it. But
But how much is it really time to yourself if you have? Because I don't think we appreciate how much of a distraction that is
Right.
until we start learning to appreciate that silence and
Right.
kind of that retiring into yourself kind of mindset.
Right.
You know?
Because that's the difference of that's quality thinking
Yes.
versus the
Yes.
you know
Yeah.
whatever you want to call
Right.
it, the quantity
Right.
thinking. You know,
Yeah, I
when
got
other things are going on.
the 10,000 hours with the TV on in the background or the radio on in the background or whatever on in the background. I got 10,000 hours of thinking, but like you said, it's not quality time.
Right.
You know,
Right.
I dig it. I dig it, man.
But you guys have probably shown enough patience
Yeah,
sitting with
growing
us.
impatient with us.
So we will leave you to the rest of your morning and afternoon. Thank you once again for joining in. And we'll see you next week, same time,
Yeah.
same place, man.
Awesome.
Appreciate
Thank
y'all.
you so much, guys.